Hi, everybody. Welcome into the Irish NFL show. It's Sunday night. Can I just take the opportunity to wish everybody here a happy bank holiday if you're in the Republic as well, off work tomorrow, unlike me. But great show tonight. We've got Jeff Reinebold coming on here now. We've got Graham Gano coming up next, and we're on the NFL Ireland Facebook page for the first time. So welcome if you're watching there. Jeff, welcome back to the show.
Oh, it's awesome to be back. It's always good crack when I'm on with you guys. How about that? I used Irish word.
There we go. We've got it started now, man. It's good. What have you been doing the last couple of weeks? I mean, I know you're back in Hawaii now. You were down in Houston for a bit, yeah?
I was down in Houston coaching in the spring league, which was a good experience, and always great to work with kids that are trying to get back to the National Football League. We were 2-1 when I left. They lost last week. They're 2-2 now. It's a big week for them this week. They got to win. Kevin Gilbride, the old Giants offensive coordinator, he's got one of the teams, the Jousters, and they're in first place right now. So my team, the Generals, got to come back and have a good finish. But, it's one of those things, Mike, where, you're down there and you're with a bunch of ex-NFL coaches, which is always fun. And then you got guys that, a number of our guys have been on NFL rosters and trying to work their way back to the National Football League. It's just, again, another example of why football and the NFL needs a developmental league, because there are far more guys, that can play in the NFL than do play in the NFL.
Jeff, that talk of making one's way back to the league kind of leads me on to the question. I'm interested because we haven't been able to discuss it yet, but you're back with us now. Tim Tebow in Jacksonville, Tebow mania. I'm interested in your take on that, because I suppose is this a great move by Urban Meyer in terms of kind of creating a distraction with Tebow and allowing Trevor Lawrence and that new team to kind of bed in while everyone focuses on Tebow? Or is Tebow going to be too much of a distraction trying to learn a new position and the circus that kind of follows Tim wherever he goes?
I think Urban, this is not a, knee-jerk reaction thing for Urban. This is something I'm sure he's thought about since before he got the job. And I think that, you got to recognize that those guys are very, very close. They went, they had that experience at the University of Florida where Tim was the quarterback that really put that program over the edge and became a national power, won a national championship, and really catapulted Urban into the stratosphere as far as coaches are concerned. So, Colin, when you look at it, it may seem far-fetched to a lot of people, but to be very honest with you, I think it's a no risk and high potential reward move by Jacksonville. He's from the Jacksonville area. It's going to create a tremendous, and you've already seen it, a tremendous amount of interest in the Jaguars, a tremendous amount of interest in the community. There's an old saying that Al Davis used to say all the time, and it doesn't matter what they say about you as long as they spell your name right. And I think that's really true when it comes to, the Jags need a shot of juice. They got the Trevor Lawrence juice and they got the Urban Meyer juice, but the Tim Tebow juice is a different kind of juice now, especially when you're talking about that area in Florida. So I think it's a great move by them because, if the kid can't play, you cut him and you move on. If he can play, you get a player for cheap, and not only a player, but a guy who's a tremendous guy in the locker room. One of the things that coaches try and do when they come into a new situation is they want their guys. They want guys who will be the voice in the locker room for them. And certainly Tim knows exactly what Urban wants. He knows exactly the way that they want to practice, how they want to perform on game day, how they want to prepare, all of those things. So he can be that, that constant, reaffirmation of what Urban Meyer's trying to build in Jacksonville in the locker room. So I think it's a good move.
Jeff, the coming week is the week in which a lot of teams have mandatory training camps. And I suppose a lot of the talk is around which players will turn up, whether they'll get fined for not showing up for the week itself. But two teams have decided that they're not going to do any mandatory training camp, the Colts and the Eagles. And bearing in mind, Sirianni is the new coach with the Eagles. You always hear about the new coaches wanting more time with the players to adjust to what they want from them going forward. Is it a surprise that they decided to not do the mandatory training camp and wait till training camp itself kicks off at the end of July?
Well, it's an interesting question because, if I'm Nick Sirianni, I want every chance I can to spend time with my players because we're a new staff. It's a new message. It's a new organization. But, again, everybody, Brian, has their own philosophy. I think some of this, and you watch how the Saints have, they've changed their OTA schedule, their off-season training schedule. And they're not the only team. And I think that's a reaction to what, the Players Association is trying to get the players to not go into, quote, voluntary workouts. But the reality of it is, if you're a fringe guy or you're a bubble guy or you're a young guy, you need to be there. You need every chance you can to make a positive impression. And this is what I'm concerned about from the Players Association standpoint. And it's natural because I see it with our Players Association too. The veteran guys are always trying to ensure their survival. And this can be an opportunity now for them to ensure their survival. Because if the rookies aren't in, if the undrafted free agents aren't in, if the guys that are, maybe, free agents that were signed in the offseason, street free agents from another team, well, those guys are going to miss opportunities to make that football team and to make an impression. And so I just really think that I don't like it. I'll be honest about it. I don't like it. I think it's selfish by the players. And I think it's already proven to have hurt some players where guys get injured working out on their own and then their insurance doesn't cover it. And, you're talking about a guy losing millions of dollars because he, tears an Achilles tendon working out on his own. I just really, really believe that they need to be in. They need to be with the strength coaches. And Coach Vermeil used to say it all the time. You build a team in the off season. You coach a team during the season. And when he talks about building a team, it's not only acquisition of players. It's creating the culture that you want. I know for a fact when he was in Kansas City, he and his wife would personally have every player and their families to their home and for a barbecue just to spend time with them, to get to know them, for them to get to know Coach and his wife, because you can't underestimate how valuable that is over the course of a football season.
Jeff, I'm amazed you started off using crack in the appropriate context. Next, we'll have to migrate you onto like how's she cutting and other appropriate Irishisms. We'll have you fully coached up. We'll build you up in that regard next while as well.
Well, I tell you what, we can make it like language exchange, because I'll give you some pidgin Hawaiian and we'll say, the kind. Well, when you use the kind, that could mean anything. So, right. So there's your first Hawaiian lesson. And I got crack. And now what was the other one I get now? What's the next one?
How's she cutting? How is she cutting?
How's she cutting?
How are you doing? How's she cutting? You got to say it with that.
What's that mean?
It just means how are you? How are you doing? It's more of columns area.
I'll throw it back to you. I'll throw it back to you in pidgin. When you see somebody and you want to ask them that same question in Hawaii, you go, "How's it, brother?
How's it, brother?" Got it.
Yeah.
This is great. The Irish Hawaiian exchange is already going swimmingly. Just send over some of the sun, Jeff. We'll call it even at that. We'll be great. But no, a more serious question. We've got obviously Graham Gano on the show later on. He's been a very successful kicker in the league. You obviously have been such a stalwart of the coaching position, especially on special teams. And we're as close to the salad days of the NFL season it can be. But there was a bit of important news, like a week or so ago on the Pat McAfee show. Adam Vinatieri, the NFL leading point scorer, announcing his retirement. Obviously, I'd like to think, as a Pats fan, and many Colts fans will think this as well, he's destined to go into the Hall of Fame. But what made Vinatieri such a great kicker for so many years, Jeff? And what are your thoughts, obviously, on his retirement now?
Well, obviously, it's sad on a couple fronts, Mark. For me personally, because Adam was the last of the NFL Europe guys hanging on. He had kicked in NFL Europe and was very successful. And that really was what catapulted and started his career. And had there not been an NFL Europe, maybe there wouldn't have been a Vinatieri. And, I agree with you, Mark. I think he's a Hall of Famer. I think he's I know it's tough on kickers, right? It's hard to get kickers in. It's, Steve Tasker, the greatest special teams player of all time, has been nominated about 6 times and isn't in, which is a travesty to me. But if Adam Vinatieri is not a Hall of Famer, then I don't have any more use for the Hall, because you look at what he has done. Not only the longevity, because that's an incredible accomplishment in itself, but let's talk about winning kicks, big kicks, money kicks, the ones that you have to make in your career. Would the Buffalo Bills history be any different if they had Adam Vinatieri on those 4 Super Bowl teams? Well, I guarantee it would have, because they would have had Super Bowls hanging in their, trophy case in Buffalo. And that, to me, is the mark of a kicker. Can you make the big kick? And he did it over and over and over again. So again, to me, it's a sad end, because we're going to miss his competitiveness, his professionalism, his outstanding talent.
Obviously, Pat McAfee announcing that the whole Vinatieri news on his show on the internet, a bit like Jeff and his Coffee with Coach show, which you can get once a week as well on Jeff's Twitter account. Jeff, we're going to try and blatantly do one more quick round of questions. The last time you were on here, we were talking about the London games and about the international expansion. And I know you were talking previously about how, you almost feel quite protective, about London having 4 games and stuff. It looks like they could still have 4 games, the 2 guaranteed, 2 other games, which could be good for games itself. But now this week we're seeing about the games in Germany. Me, you, the boys, Allianz Stadium, that's good. Jeff, yes?
I think it's fantastic, because the more we can get the Irish NFL show on the road, the better it is, because I'm hopeful to be over in London for the London games, and I know you guys are going to be in town, and certainly we'd love to do a show together with you guys. And what better place than some beer hall in Germany to put the crew on the road and go to Germany for one. So I'm excited about it, as long as, with the caveat again, that it doesn't cost London any games. But from what I understand of it, these are games that will be independent, standalone games, and that the NFL is now sourcing cities that want to have a game in their community. So, for example, whether you're Frankfurt or Cologne or Berlin or Hamburg, all cities in Germany that have had NFL Europe, at least NFL Europe experiences, I think it's a great opportunity for the game to continue to grow on the continent.
Jeff, I suppose you were last on with us just after the draft, and at that point, the Falcons had taken the unicorn of the draft in Kyle Pitts, and it looked like Matt Ryan was staying. That offense looked like it was going to be so explosive, but we've obviously seen Julio wants out. With Julio all set to basically pack his bags over the next few weeks, it looks like. Do you think the Kyle Pitts pick was the right one? If they, by all accounts, they maybe knew Julio wanted out anyway. Does it make sense to take a player like that if you're losing your WR1?
I think so, because I think Kyle Pitts is just such a generational talent. When you have, there are 2 philosophies, Colin, when you approach the draft. One is you're going to take the best player available. Number 2, you're going to draft to need. Well, obviously, if they knew, and I think they were, the conversations had at least started that Julio wanted out. So they were aware of it. And there were a number of fantastic wide receivers on the board when Pitts was there. But I just really feel for Fontenot, he couldn't turn his back on that talent, on that generational talent. And let's be honest, the tight end is an ever evolving position in the National Football League. Gone are the days of John Mackey and Mike Ditka and Mark Bavaro and those tight ends. Now we're into Travis Kelce and guys that can do so much for you in the passing game. George Kittle is, I guess, a little bit of a throwback because he's such a good inline player. But I just really think that a guy with Pitts's unique skill set, and you called him a unicorn, and I think that's a really fair example because, you don't see those things very often. And he certainly is a rare talent. And Atlanta has to feel fantastic that they got him.
Jeff, I read a local article here during the week where a journalist said last year it was unusual to watch sport in empty stadiums. Now he finds it weird watching sports again with fans in the stadium because it's gone so long. This season, when the NFL starts, there's teams obviously have a big home factor, but I think fans will be appreciative of the fact that they're back at games, back in home stadiums, that they wouldn't have really never thought this pandemic would ever happen. And it'll be a huge difference for home teams going forward next season. And the away teams will struggle initially at the start of the season.
No question. We had Maurice Kelly, who's the vice president of the Seattle Seahawks, on Coffee with the Coach last week, Brian. And one of our members of the tribe sent in that very question. Now that that it's been a year with no fans in the stands, the question was basically, do you think that the 12s will be even louder than they were last year? And Maurice kind of chuckled and he said, yeah, because they've had a whole year to rest their voice box. But the reality of it is, when you're in Seattle, and he admitted this, he said, you see things go on in the game in that stadium that don't go on in other stadiums because the noise is just so incredible. I don't know if you guys know this, but more than one time, the University of Washington is about maybe 10 miles from that stadium. And the University of Washington geology department has a seismograph that measures on the Richter scale, measures earthquakes. And when the 12s are really going, they actually register on the Richter scale as an earthquake. That's how loud that building is. And so he talked about the 11 false starts that the Giants had in one game, 11 false starts in one game. And he talked about how the Packers just completely fell apart. They had the game won and completely fell apart underneath that just shower of noise that is, playing in Seattle. So for teams like that, for the Saints, for the Bears, for, all of those places, Cleveland, where the fans are such a big part of the game, I think this is going to be huge. 30 of 32 teams have already gotten approval to have fans in the stands again.
Yeah, I mean, Kansas City, I'd throw in there with Arrowhead as well, Jeff. And
absolutely.
Back in Seattle, it was 2010, the infamous Beastquake, of course, was the first occasion they'd appeared on the seismologist charts. So, with that in mind, Jeff, and we're getting, we're moving gears now, like 2021, Brady lifting the Super Bowl, that's in the rearview mirror. Training camps are about to ramp up. We're getting ready for the 21 season, as are all the teams. And one thing is that obviously June the 1st is a big date in the NFL calendar from contractual purposes and post June 1st cuts. But, we're a few days on now. We haven't seen mass exoduses and mass decisions. Is this kind of a related part of the cap and people having to get their cap in order and therefore there's not as many post June 1st designated cuts? Or are you just expecting, they're just enjoying, it was Memorial Day weekend, the last weekend, they're just taking it easy for a bit. Next week is going to go crazy again.
No, I'm going to tell you something. Mark, right now, everybody is so fixated on getting ready for the season. But what you did hit on was something I think that's really true. We're in kind of uncharted territory with the cap because of the 1 year shrinkage of the cap. And so what people are trying to do is figure out how they can manage salaries going forward, because we know the cap's going to grow. But how can you downsize for 1 year and then expand back? That's why you've seen so many players renegotiate contracts or redo their contracts, because they give the team some salary cap relief and then make it back up when the cap picks up again down the road. So that's part of it. And here's the other thing, we talked about Julio Jones a little bit. And there was a lot of speculation that it was going to take a first-round draft choice to get Julio Jones out of Atlanta. Well, let me tell you something. How many days after June 1st are we now? And he still hasn't gone anywhere. And that tells me that two things, that the Falcons are sitting really tight on the money, right? They want whoever gets Julio to offset the money that they owe him against their cap. And because they're going to get some cap relief because it's post June 1. And I think the truth of the matter is nobody's offered a first round pick, at least not at this point. Because I think if the Falcons got a first round pick and some relief, salary relief, he'd be out of there right now. And because they want to move on. I mean, the longer it lingers, the tougher it gets. It can get acrimonious, after you stay. It's like a divorce. Sometimes, man, you just got to move on.
Jeff, on a side note, an Atlanta fan said to me, a friend of mine the other week, he said, there's no way Julio go less from the first. There's no way and everything. And I reminded him that Randy Moss, of course, went for a fourth rounder and then subsequently for a third rounder back to the Vikings. And his face was, it was quite funny, but it was devastating for him. He suddenly realized, I might be deluded here.
Well, you're right. I mean, the reality of it is, Mark, it's a soft receivers market in free agency, right? And so if it was soft in free agency, it's soft at the trade deadline too, So again, they're going to get as much as they possibly can for Julio. And there is interest in Julio, but they're dealing with some tough trade partners too. And, that's the give and take of the game. And I just really think that for Atlanta, certainly, and for Julio himself, the sooner he can move on and go to another team and get involved in the offseason program, and the better it is going to be for everybody.
Time will tell, and we will see what happens with Julio, with Aaron, et cetera, et cetera. But Jeff, you have your own show as well. I guess for just before we go, for anybody that hasn't watched your show before on Twitter, on YouTube, do you want to just tell us just a bit about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's you and I get together and we talk a little NFL and we have amazing guests. I mean, we've been so fortunate to have so many guys. We have NFL players, we've got NFL execs, we've got members of the media, we've had all kinds of people. This next week, one of the best quarterback coaches I've ever been around, and certainly one of the, you look at his track record, has coached 2 Hall of Famers, played in the NFL himself, was a head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, a head coach of the San Diego Chargers. June Jones is going to come on, and we're going to talk quarterbacks because we're going to go through, how you select them, what you look for in them. He's going to tell a fascinating story of when the San Diego Chargers, when he was the offensive coordinator of the Chargers, and they had to make a decision between Manning and Ryan Leaf. And they brought in a brain specialist to evaluate the 2 players. And I'm not going to say what he said until you listen to the show. So it's Coffee with the Coach, and you can get it either on Twitter, on YouTube, on Apple iTunes. Where else, Michael?
Spotify, all good podcast providers. So the show goes out it's a different day of the minute each week. Usually on Tuesday during the season, the audio goes out around the weekend. Just search Coffee with Coach on podcast form.
You get a mixture of the cerebral and you get the crack with Jeff as well. Jeff, you always bring the crack, in fairness, and we want to thank you again for being so generous with your time. We appreciate it. We look forward to getting you back on again as we kind of move throughout the summer and into August and pre-season. But we'll let you go and enjoy that beautiful summer day that we see behind you. So thanks again for being so generous with your time.
Hey, it's my pleasure, fellas. I love this island to island football exchange we're having.